sue for peace, to basically try to freeze the conflict where it is, take these 4 provinces that they've essentially occupied and annexed, and say, okay, let's just call this whole thing off. What do you make of the current state of the conflict?
So I think Putin's weakness and his desperation, both in this nuclear saber rattling, but also in these launches of missiles into civilian territory. The fact of the matter is he is losing this war on the ground every single day. He is losing every single day. He's losing allies. You saw the vote in the UN today when many developing nations that previously had either stayed out or sided with Russia now are unequivocally calling on Russia to end this war. Listen, I think you have to show Putin the limits of his power. And so I think we have to stick with Ukraine for the time being. I worry that if we sat down right now and cut an early deal with Putin, the words on the paper wouldn't be worth the cost of the paper. Putin walks away from his commitments all the time. So I think we have to show him the limits, and that probably comes with supporting Ukraine as they move further into the east over the coming weeks and months. And then I think there might be a moment when Putin is staring at a very different kind of leverage. That might be the time for negotiation. I don't know that it's right now.
You are the senator from the state of Connecticut. You were before that a congressman in Connecticut, and you represented the Newtown, where the Sandy Hook massacre took place. I know that you were very close with many of those families who are both constituents and I think personal friends of yours. And I was curious to get your reaction today to that verdict, not the verdict, but the announcement of damages in that Connecticut courthouse today of Alex Jones being ordered to pay nearly $1 billion to those families.
I think the first thing you have to realize is how much courage it took for these families to stare down Alex Jones. This was not a foregone conclusion that they were going to make this case, because they were going to have to be there in court. They were going to have to look at him. They were going to have to talk about what his conspiracy theory campaign has meant for them. Obviously, they have been harassed. They've been targeted. There's been death threats. Many of these families have had to move multiple times to try to escape the harassment that has been organized by Alex Jones. So I'm just in awe of these families continuously, that they are willing to stand up for themselves and for many others that Alex Jones has targeted. But I think we have to realize that there was an audience for what Alex Jones was putting out into the ecosystem, and that audience won't disappear. He's just one organism in a much broader ecosystem, and until the political right and the Republican Party decides to expunge Alex Jones and his ilk from their broader political movement, there's just going to be other Alex Joneses, even if InfoWars is destroyed or made bankrupt by this lawsuit. So a heroic effort on behalf of the Sandy Hook families, but the Republican Party and the political right have to decide that every Alex Jones out there has no part in organized political dialogue.
Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, thank you for your time tonight, sir.
Thank you.
That is all in on this Wednesday night. Alex Wagner tonight starts right now. Good evening, Alex.
Good evening. Podcast on Apple Podcasts or any place you listen to podcasts. The news continues. I want to hand it over to Jake Tapper and CNN tonight.
Moments ago, the trust fund brat that never worked a day in his life in a hoodie, John Fetterman, was forced to answer why he is unwilling to come on this program and defend his radical positions. Here's a slight tease.
Sean Hannity said that he has repeatedly issued an invitation to your campaign to be his guest solo for the 3 hours of his radio show and 1 full hour of his national TV show. He said he's gotten no response from you, which I assume means you're a no. So my question is, sir, as a United States Senator, and I worked for one that would be the late John Hines, you have to do this, debating the opposition thing all the time. And I'm just curious as to what your reasoning is for not doing that.
Well, we got an answer. We'll play Fetterman's full answer coming up tonight. Also tonight, we have just obtained exclusively for this program 2 full hours of body cam footage from the 2020 incident involving Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia and his ex-wife, where she accused him of running her over with his Tesla following a domestic dispute. 2 hours. Now, those on the left who believe, say, believe all women. Are they feigning outrage over Herschel Walker because he allegedly paid for an abortion many years ago? Are they only caring about believing women that accuse Republicans? Is this going to change the race in Georgia? We've got that tape coming up exclusively right here on the show. And also, Arizona Democrat Katie Hobbs is running and hiding literally from tough questions, and she still refuses to debate Kari Lake. We have exclusive footage from Project Veritas showing Hobbs frantically avoiding a reporter. We'll play that. But first, we begin with Joe Biden tonight, who just sat down for one of the coziest, they could have lit a fire and toasted marshmallows interview with fake news' CNN's fake Jake Tapper, who coddled the president with a variety of softball questions, virtually no follow-ups. That's fine. I expect that. Make no mistake. Fake Jake, he's not a journalist. He's a Democratic activist. He is a talk show host. I'm a talk show host. We're members of the press. I'm honest. He's not. It's okay. All he needs to do is be honest with his viewers that he has a political side. He's a Trump-hating liberal Democrat like almost everyone else on fake news CNN and MSDNC. Now, still, despite Tapper's best effort to be gentle with the president, the ever so, compromised president, even politely picking up Joe's cheat sheet at one point, Biden still mangled, at the end to make a total complete fool of himself, mangling one word after another. He said he was so proud of his son, Hunter, the smartest guy he knows. It may be truth to that because he made all this money with no experience. Got to give the devil his due. He said the vast majority of Americans approve of his decisions in office. I beg to differ. The polls do as well. And get this, he claimed that we are definitely not in a recession. He said it. Take a look.
Should the American people prepare for a recession?
No. Look, they've been saying this now. How every 6 months they say this. Every 6 months they look down the next 6 months and say what's going to happen. It hadn't happened yet. It hadn't been. There's no guarantee that you're under. I don't think there will be a recession. If it is, it'll be a very slight recession. That is, we'll move down slightly.
See, after 2 straight quarters of negative growth, consecutive quarters of negative growth, we are officially in a recession, not to mention the housing crash, the bear market, spiking interest rates, and to top it all off, inflation still at a 41-year high. Gas prices are now more than double what they were under President Trump, and they're going much higher very quickly. And that brings us to Biden's utter humiliation at the hands of OPEC and Saudi Arabia. Remember, after he went begging and pleading with MBS, the guy he once called the murderer of Jamal Khashoggi, and begged them to please produce more oil, the country that he said was a pariah nation, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Well, they, in conjunction with OPEC, in full alignment with Vladimir Putin and Russia, they decided to do the exact opposite of what Joe wanted, and they produced less. He got on his hands and knees, kissed the ring in the ass of MBS, and it didn't work. Even fist pumped him. Anyway, 2 million barrels a day less, thanks to Joe's diplomacy. Last night, according to Joe Biden, it was never about the oil. This is a lie. Take a look.
Do you think it's time for the U.S. to rethink its relationship with Saudi Arabia?
Yes, and by the way, let's get straight why I went. I didn't go to oil. I went about making sure that we weren't going to walk away from the Middle East and what was going on.
Okay. He went there for the oil. He went there to beg Saudi Arabia for help in the midterms. We now have a new report, a bombshell report from the Wall Street Journal, that Joe Biden was pleading with OPEC and Saudi Arabia to delay the production decrease of oil for a few months, meaning it's likely that MBS and OPEC told Joe Biden right to his face that he would not only not produce more oil, but he can cut production, and he would cut production dramatically. Quote, Saudi officials dismissed Biden's request, which they viewed as a political gambit by the administration to avoid bad news ahead of the U.S. midterm elections. They were right. They laughed in his face. This is not just humiliating for Joe Biden, and it is humiliating, but he was groveling to the guy that he called a murderer. The murderer literally spit in his face and spit in the face of the entire country, the USA. And despite Biden's efforts to keep this quiet, we now know the truth, and Joe has no long-term solution for spiking gas prices, no plan to tap into our own domestic resources, no new pipeline deals on deck, just a political gambit, and it failed miserably, and we're all paying the price for it. And now he's accusing Saudi Arabia and OPEC of aligning with Putin, which had already happened. How stupid can Joe be? They have been aligning for quite some time, all in an effort. They have been coordinating to drive up energy costs by manipulating the world's supply, knowing that Joe Biden is so stupid and so beholden to the new Green Deal socialist Democrats that he's going to artificially reduce the world's supply, which means they get even richer. They will continue to deny Joe Biden, begging and pleading again and again. Joe will keep begging and humiliating himself and humiliating our country, all because he's too stupid to produce it domestically and become energy independent like Donald Trump did. Unfortunately for the country, Joe Biden does not value logic or truth. He bows at the dark altar of the climate alarmist religious cult. Never forget it. And with each passing day, reality becomes more and more blurred for the president. In fact, today he falsely claimed that his son Beau lost his life in Iraq. This is pretty scary. It's like a, where's Jackie moment. Take a look.
Just imagine, I mean it sincerely. I say this as a father of a man who won the Bronze Star, the Conspicuous Service Medal, and lost his life in Iraq.
That didn't happen. His son tragically died from cancer shortly after his second term as Delaware's Attorney General. Tonight, it is not clear if Biden is confused, lying, or both. I suspect it is the significant cognitive decline that we chronicle regularly. Either way, it's not a good look from the guy who has checked his watch, remember, over and over again during the dignified transfer of servicemen and women that were killed in Afghanistan because of Joe's awful and deadly withdrawal from Kabul. And frankly, Biden seems pretty classless, pretty self-absorbed, right on cue. Here's Joe talking about himself yet again. Take a look.
I grew up in Claymont, Delaware, and I went to a little school called Holy Rosie Grade School across from Claymont Fire Hall. And all my buddies either became a firefighter, a cop, or a priest. I wouldn't qualify for any of them, so here I am.
Well, the last part's true. You don't qualify for those jobs, and you're certainly not qualified to be president. Now, given his first 2 years in office, that is painfully obvious for anyone with eyes to see. Here with reaction, Fox News contributor Joe Concha, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. This report in the Wall Street Journal, Daily Mail picked it up as well, that the Saudis rejected it. Now we know that they probably rejected Joe right to his face. And then Joe went to plan B, which is, can you please not cut production until after the election? Now, wouldn't that be seeking outside influence in light of the upcoming midterm elections? In other words, if you're asking Saudi Arabia and OPEC to wait to reduce the world supply, are you trying to manipulate the country's vote? Mike?
Mike,
you
you
want
want
that one?
Okay, I'll jump on it.
All right, jump on it. Yeah.
I'll jump all over that one. What doesn't make sense is that we have not only an ample supply of energy for the next 400 or 500 years, even if we had the kind of growth that we anticipate. So we could take care of our needs and even export energy. But the president shut that down. He can say that he didn't, but he did. And the fact is, it not only has had a dramatic impact on prices, but it's also had an impact on our ability to be free. A country that has to beg people for its energy is a country that is enslaved to whoever it is supplying the energy. And right now, we are at the mercy of not the best actors in the world when it comes to our own needs of energy.
It's so embarrassing, Joe Concha, and the media just totally ignores it. As they ignore the high price of gasoline. They were so anxious to report, gas prices have come down, 50 days in a row because Joe put a Band-Aid on the problem, and that was releasing the strategic petroleum reserves, which, by the way, compromises our national security to artificially increase supplies, which lower prices. So he did that temporarily. Okay, now that's had to stop because he's depleted half of them. So now prices are on the rise again and the media is silent.
It's amazing. And it's like
me gaining 50 pounds, Sean, right? And my wife says, you know, you look like you're in your second trimester at this point. I think you need to lose some weight. So then I go out and I lose 7 pounds in a month, and then have the audacity to go back to her to say, you know, honey, I've never lost weight this quickly in my life and this much weight so fast. And that's the same thing with gas prices. It went to an all-time high. They bring it down to the $3.50 range, which, remember, when Donald Trump left office, it was about $2.30 a gallon, so it's still well above that. And they blame Vladimir Putin price hike and that whole hashtag before prices came down, and now we see it going back towards, it's almost at $4 a gallon. It will only go higher, and the fact that we have to depend on Venezuela and OPEC Plus, which is basically Russia and Saudi Arabia, instead of energy independence that we had here at home, gas and oil leases off of the Gulf Coast, off of the Alaska coast, ANWR, obviously XL pipeline, and now we're dependent on all these other countries. We backed ourselves into this corner, and with the midterm coming, I don't see how this reverses at this point. But to talk about that interview last night, Sean, not many people watched. 29th place overall among cable news shows. Your program more than tripled its audience, Jake Tapper's audience, and you didn't have the leader of the free world on at last check. So that's embarrassing. And the interview was also pre-taped, by the way. Why wasn't it live? And when Joe Biden has done the 3 TV interviews he's done this year, whether it was with 60 Minutes, NBC, and now CNN, for whatever reason, they're taped a couple days beforehand so they could go to something called post-production, edit what they need to, homogenize it, and make the president perhaps look better than he would in a live setting. That's how these interviews should go, but the president will never agree to that, and these news organizations are going to allow that. Overall, I think Jonathan Turley asked a great question. Quote, if Hunter was a hopeless addict, incapable of criminal intent or sound decision-making, why were foreign interests clamoring at his door to give him millions of dollars as a board member, lawyer, or consultant? I would have liked to have heard Jake Tapper ask the president about that, or the fentanyl crisis that's killing 300 Americans a day on average due to overdoses. But of course, we didn't get those questions because we don't want to make the president uncomfortable or anything on national television. Now do we, Jake?
Yeah, we kind of do. Governor, let me go back to you. By the way, it was great to have Sarah back on the program, and she's doing great. Thank God she's cancer-free. She will be the next governor of Arkansas. I'm pretty confident. As you look at the House and the Senate, the Senate in particular, we got Florida, we got Georgia, we've got North and South Carolina, we got New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Ohio, we got Wisconsin, we got Nevada, we have Arizona. We seem to think that maybe Patty Murray is in trouble in the state of Washington. Maybe even we're in play in Colorado. Where do you see this falling out? We're 27 days away from what I believe is an inflection point, a tipping point election, midterm election in this country. Where do you see the result going?
I honestly think Republicans are going to have a much better night than anybody predicts, largely because the polling information is simply unreliable. And there's a reason that it's unreliable. Right now, if you're pro-life, if you're Christian, if you're conservative, if you are a MAGA Republican, which means you just think that America is a great country and we ought to preserve it and protect it and pass it on that. If you're one of those people, you're kind of thinking that any given day the FBI may show up, bang your door down and haul you in. If not, they may put you on a list. They may call you a domestic terrorist, threat to democracy. So conservatives simply don't answer polls. So I think we're seeing something that really can't be factored in. And I was talking to Robert Cahaly of the Trafalgar Group, one of the few polling organizations that has some credibility. And he was very blunt in saying, no white men between 30 and 50 will answer a poll question. And for the most part, most all of the Trump supporters simply will not answer a poll. They don't put yard signs up anymore. They don't put a lot of bumper strips, but they will go vote because they know it's the last line of defense they have to protect their country and their families.
Governor, thank you for being with us. We're glad Sarah's healthy. Joe's book, Come On Man, is doing very well. Congratulations, Joe Concha. Thank you both for being with us. All right, there you have it. 27 days till the all-important midterm elections. We're looking at the gubernatorial race out of New Mexico. It is now uncomfortably close for the Democratic incumbent. Take a look at this brand new ad exclusively provided to this program by the Republican Governors Association. Take a look.
During COVID, Michelle Lujan Grisham locked down New Mexico, but let hundreds of criminals out of prison early. Many went on to commit more crimes, including career criminal Chris Beltran. After Lujan Grisham released him early, Beltran violated probation, got sent back to jail. Then Lujan Grisham's administration released him early again. Days after his early release, he hunted his ex-girlfriend down, shot her in the face, murdered her. This should never have happened.
Defund, dismantle, no bail. How's that working out? Her Republican opponent, Mark Ronchetti, is now within a few points in the latest poll. It would be a long shot, but this is a winnable race, clearly, for the GOP. Meanwhile, out in the state of Washington, Republican Senate candidate Tiffany Smiley is now within 2 points of the state's longtime Senator Patty Murray in what is a clear rebuke of the Biden agenda. Take a look.
With Biden and the D.C. politicians in charge, gas prices more than doubled. Senator Murray votes 96% with Biden. She just goes along. Groceries, housing, everything costs more with Biden and his D.C. cronies in charge. And Senator Murray just goes along, 96% with Biden. Baby formula shortage, empty shelves, on our streets, and Senator Murray fades away and just goes along.
All right, here with more is Washington Republican Senate candidate Tiffany Smiley is with us. All right, this race now is within the margin of error. A lot is going on out there. It's the same issues we see in the rest of the country, and that is record high inflation, 41-year high, double the prices for a gallon of gasoline that we were paying under Donald Trump, wide open borders, no bail laws, defund, dismantle the police, and school systems that are a disaster and pushing a woke agenda. That seems to even be impacting a state of Washington, which maybe many people didn't predict would be in play.
Yes, Sean, you're exactly right. I mean, these aren't Democrat or Republican issues. They're American issues. And when I stood up and fought for my husband and then took on VA reform, I was fighting for every Democrat, every Republican, and every independent disabled service member and their family. So I've been at this for 18 months. I've listened to the voters of Washington State. You know, a year ago, they were worried about the rising cost of living, gas prices, crime in our streets, overdoses from fentanyl. We are looking to super exceed 2021 in our overdoses from fentanyl. I mean, this has to be stopped. These are life and death issues. You know, I'm a nurse. Washington State needs healing. They need hope. And that's what we have been talking about from the very beginning. That's exactly why you are seeing these polls tighten. We've ran a great campaign, raised good money. We're still raising money because we know our message is a winning message. We're seeing these polls tighten because we've gone up on air and shared our message. We double down and meet that with the voters on the ground everywhere. You know, not that long ago, I was at the Soto homeless encampment, helping clean up a homeless encampment, cleaning up dirty needles. And I wanted to talk to the residents to understand their hardships and their barriers to getting help and having hope. And as I was there cleaning up, a woman from across the camp who was helping clean up as well, she said, Tiffany Smiley. You know, I was kind of like, yes, that's me. I'm really a nice person. I don't know what ads you're watching, but we're doing great work here in Washington. She said, I have voted for Patty Murray every single time. This year, I'm honored to vote for you. And it was a special moment where we're standing in the middle of just destruction, where people are poisoning themselves to death and no one's helping them. Senator Patty Murray is silent on the issues that are affecting Washington voters every single day. That's why we will win this race. Washington State wants hope. And anyone can join us at smileyforwashington.com. We need money to continue to share our winning message all across Washington State.
Patty Murray has been hand in hand, arm in arm with all these failed policies that are hurting the American people, and that includes the people in Washington State, your state. This is going to be an interesting race to watch. Tiffany Smiley, thanks for being with us. All right, coming up, we have obtained the disturbing body cam footage, 2 hours of it, from the incident where Raphael Warnock allegedly ran over his ex-wife with his car. We're going to show you all of what she had to say. Now, the media is playing defense in Georgia and they're playing defense in Pennsylvania. We'll talk about both those races. That's all coming up straight ahead.
The election being stolen, but they wish to stay in the good graces of Trump world, and they prioritize their ambition and careers for that. But then I do think there are some people who truly are detached from reality and have convinced themselves enough that the election was stolen.
And just to remind people, you are a conservative Republican. Correct. Is there still a place for you in the Republican Party?
I still think there is a place. I'm hopeful that by speaking out and saying that Donald Trump is lying to the American people about the 2020 election, that it will hopefully encourage more people to come forward and acknowledge this. And I think that the more people that are willing to stand up and speak the truth will save the Republican Party, but I'm not encouraged by the direction that it's headed right now.
We've seen a lot of brave young women from the Trump White House, you, Cassidy Hutchinson, Alyssa Farah Griffin, coming forward. I wish that some of the middle-aged men who had been in positions of power over you had such courage. Sarah Matthews, thanks so much. Good to see you. Thanks for being here tonight. From one of the most notorious liars in the history of the presidency to one of the most notorious liars in American pop culture. Coming up next, the face that launched 1,000 ripoffs in one very popular Netflix series. My interview with Anna Sorokin, aka Anna Delvey, now rocking the ankle monitor. That's next.
So first off, can you tell us more about how the committee got its hands on these Secret Service correspondence? It sounds like it's a lot of material, and up until this point, there is a real question about how cooperative the service was being with this investigation.
Yeah, Alex, that is a really good place to start. And as my colleague Carol Lenig and I outlined in our piece, it was sort of an ironic twist of events. The committee really came to believe, especially the lawmakers on the committee investigating the January 6th attack, that the Secret Service ultimately was not being cooperative. They came to this conclusion after they almost stumbled across some of the radio frequencies that they ultimately used in the second to last hearing that showed an anonymous Secret Service agent raising serious alarms about the violence that he was seeing on the Capitol. After that moment, the committee then realized that they were still missing quite a few materials, especially these text messages have been out of all of the communications most under the spotlight, although our reporting has also told us that the committee ultimately was not able to obtain these deleted text messages from key players, people like Tony Ornato, during this time period. But at the end of the day, DHS finally started taking a more cooperative posture and delivered 1.5 million documents, Microsoft Team chats, emails, text messages from Secret Service agents beyond what the committee had initially asked for. So the committee really has had a plethora of new communications and documents to piece through to create a better, more cohesive and detailed picture of what exactly happened in the lead up to January 6th on that day and in the aftermath.
I still think it surprises a lot of people that the Secret Service may not have been initially cooperative with what was one of the greatest security breaches in our nation's history. I wonder how much you think events of recent weeks, for example, the Oath Keepers trial, which is ongoing, the notion that Stuart Rhodes, the head of the Oath Keepers, may have had a direct line to a Secret Service agent in the run-up to January 6th. How much do you think the news of that, the evidence there, the mounting scrutiny over the choice to wipe all of these phones carried by Secret Service agents on the 5th and 6th of January, how much that external pressure ultimately led to the agency cooperating with the January 6th committee? Do you have a sense that that was going on internally, a sort of hand-wringing about what to do?
Yeah, and we also know that Secretary Mayorkas was pretty alarmed at the lack of cooperation. At the end of the day, though, Secret Service is sort of its own siloed entity within the Department of Homeland Security, and the former president has sort of gained this reputation for becoming extremely close and developing these kind of unusual, untraditional relationships with Secret Service agents. For example, Tony Ornato in particular was an agent who worked for the Secret Service, who then went back to work, who then became a Trump administration official and worked directly for the president in a political position. This was something that was really unprecedented, and I think raised a lot of questions and alarms about whether or not he was able to do his job of protecting the president while also serving in a political role and trying to appease the former president. The same with Bobby Engel. A lot of these relationships have been scrutinized as these new details about the Secret Service's actions on the day of January 6th. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow we do see some potential communications that go beyond Tony Ornato and Bobby Engel of people in the service who might have been a bit more sympathetic to the insurrectionists than we would like for our people who serve in the federal government to be.
Jacqueline, where do things stand with Tony Ornato testifying behind closed doors with the committee? Because there's so much confusion about what exactly happened on January 6th between the Secret Service and Donald Trump.
Yeah, right now, where Tony Ornato stands is he is no longer a government employee. He actually resigned the day he was supposed to conduct an interview with the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General as part of an internal investigation into his actions with regards to January 6th. And he also has yet to appear for another January 6th interview with the Congressional Committee investigating the insurrection. That being said, he did initially appear for an interview earlier in the spring where he couldn't recall a lot of answers to questions that other witnesses were able to recall. As one committee source phrased it to me quite eloquently, is that these guys, referring to Tony Ornato and Bobby Engel, Trump's Secret Service detail, was that they were not being honest. And that what we're going to see tomorrow potentially is more holes being poked in the responses that they were giving to investigators in their closed door depositions. New evidence, information, communication that shows that they didn't they weren't being truthful about not being able to recall certain things, and that their relationships with people like Cassidy Hutchinson and other witnesses who the committee has heard from were actually much closer and trusted than they have let on.
I mean, to say nothing of the fate of Tony Ornato and Bobby Engel, it could be a real problem for the integrity of the Secret Service if, in fact, that is what we learn tomorrow. Jackie Alamany, congressional investigations reporter for the Washington Post. Great to see you, Jackie. Thanks for making time tonight.
Thanks, Alex.
Up next, Judgment Day, as a jury orders conspiracy theorist Alex Jones to pay nearly $1 billion to the families who have been harassed for nearly 10 years by Sandy Hook truthers who hung on Alex Jones' every word. The attorney who won that massive judgment joins us next.
But have you reached out to anybody? Have you reached out to any of your friends or the hotels or the restaurants or anyone?
Well, I didn't steal any money from friends. The only friend that was involved in my friend case, I got acquitted of that count.
Right.
And everybody else is a financial institution.
When you say right now, you just said that, you know, what you did it to financial institutions. It doesn't sound like you really regret what you did. You sound like you're almost kind of like casting it as though it was a victimless crime. It wasn't a victimless crime, right? I mean, you took advantage of people.
I definitely did, yeah. And I was younger and I learned from my mistakes.
But did you?
I did,
Did
yeah.
you learn from those mistakes? I mean, are you not going to do anything like this ever again?
Absolutely not.
So you served 20 months in pretrial detention at Rikers. Then you were convicted. You did another 20 months. Then you were released. And then instead of going back to Europe, you did 18 months here in the United States in immigration custody.
That's right.
But why not be free in Europe instead of in detention in the United States? Can you help me
Because
understand
I'm
that?
trying to fix the mistakes that I've done in the past. And I feel like if I were to leave and say, oh, whatever, I'm just going to do, I'm just going to move on and like move to Europe. And I would be like accepting the labels that they're trying to slap on me. Something like me just staying in jail and trying to prove people wrong. That's something. I hope people will recognize it.
But what do you mean prove people wrong? By staying in the United States and doing what? How are you going to prove anybody wrong?
Well, I'm still on my criminal parole. I'm still with ICE, and I'm trying to comply with all the rules and restrictions they're placing on me and just kind of change the narrative.
What's your case to immigration for why you should get to stay in the United States after everything that happened? Why should the American people let you stay here knowing how effectively you conned and fleeced so many Americans here already?
Well, I feel like I deserve a second chance. It was my mistake that I've made, and I served my time, and I feel like I should deserve a second opportunity.
Do you think there's something about the United States where we are fascinated by con artists, grifters, liars? Is there something that we like, that we find interesting?
I would say so, yes. I was thinking if I were to be prosecuted for similar crimes in Germany, I don't think people would really care.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I feel like I never really wanted to be famous, and
You didn't want to be famous? You just wanted to be influential and well connected.
yeah, I just wanted to like work on my business, and I feel like part of it was the prosecution, the way they portrayed me, and just the media. They kind of created this idea of me, and I'm just being left to deal with it.
But you convinced people that you were an heiress, that you had lots of money that you didn't have. And
I actually never said that to anybody. That was just an assumption they had.
well, see, you're saying all this stuff to me. It doesn't sound like you're really actually all that repentant. It doesn't sound like you're actually really regret what you did, or even necessarily think you did anything wrong.
I mean, I've definitely did like I made a lot of wrong choices
Like what?
while just misrepresenting, I guess, my financials to financial institutions.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to like not glamorize my crimes and not lead anybody to believe that that's the way to get famous, because I suffered a lot as a result, like as a consequences of my actions too. Even though like I don't always show it, I'm not like going to go on TV and cry, but like I've done a lot of time in jail, and it's been very hard a lot of times.
So what's the plan now for how you're going to support yourself?
I am working on my podcast, and I'm doing more of my art. I'm so very happy I've been afforded a second chance to like to stay here and to fix my mistakes, and hopefully I will be known for some of my legit projects and not just what I've been trying to do when I was in my early to mid 20s.
Okay. The best is yet to come.
Yes.
And you can see even more of our interview with Anna on Twitter and on CNN.com, including her thoughts on the U.S. criminal justice system and how she says she wants to work to change it. The Sixth Amendment guarantees that we can all get a lawyer to defend us if we're charged with a crime. It does not guarantee that you will get a good lawyer. Coming up, an example so disturbing that I just couldn't be silent about it. With a defense lawyer like this, who needs prosecutors?
That job written all over it. Sandy Hook is a synthetic, completely fake, with actors, in my view, manufactured. All I know is the official story of Sandy Hook has more holes in it than Swiss cheese.
For a decade, the far-right conspiracy theorist / media personality Alex Jones has been saying that the Sandy Hook massacre did not actually happen. 26 people died in that Connecticut school shooting in 2012. 20 of them were first graders. All of those victims had families. And those families, thanks to Jones's lies, not only lost a loved one, but have faced a decade of harassment and threats from Jones's followers. All while Alex Jones himself has profited. Today, a jury in Connecticut unanimously ordered that Alex Jones and his company pay $965 million in damages to the families of 8 victims from that shooting. That comes on top of the $49 million Jones has already been ordered to pay in a similar case in Texas. Amazingly, Jones was live on his show when today's verdict came out. And despite hearing exactly how he's hurt these families, just a staggering amount of pain and anguish that's been described in detail over the course of this trial. Despite that fact, and the fact that he now faces $1 billion in damages, Alex Jones still believes this is all just one big joke.
The judge looks pleased. Probably $200 million. I don't have any money, so it's all a big joke.
$120 million.
Yeah!
$55 million.
Yeah!
$54 million.
Yeah!
By juror number 1. $28,800,000. Initially by juror.
Get those numbers up.
$57,600,000.
Good, that's better.
Initially by juror number 1.
Get those numbers up.
$73,600,000.
Yeah! If they don't hit $1 billion, I'm not happy. I want to be the $1 billion man. They actually believe we're getting this money. It's like they believe all their own stuff. But we're not scared. and we're not going away, and we're not going to stop. And literally, for hundreds of thousands of dollars, I can keep them in court for years. I can appeal this stuff. We could stand up against this travesty, against the billions of dollars they want. It's a joke. So please go to InfoWarsStore.com and get Vitamin Mineral Fusion, get X3, get all the great products that are there that keep us on air.
No remorse, no regret, just straight to plugging the powders and supplements you can buy on his website. Now, Alex Jones is claiming he is nearly broke. He's saying he'll appeal this decision to keep it tied up in the courts while he fundraises and sells his junk supplements to his followers and attempts to make profits off of national tragedies.
They want to scare everybody away from freedom and scare us away from questioning Uvalde and what really happened there, or Parkland or any other event. And guess what? We're not scared, and we're not going away, and we're not going to stop.
Joining us now is Chris Mattei. Mattei was the lead attorney for the Sandy Hook families who argued their case in court. I am pleased to say he joins me now. Chris, thanks for joining me, and congratulations on finding some measure of closure for these families who have been struggling with this for an unfathomable decade of their lives.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I appreciate you.
What of Alex Jones's contention that he can tie this up in court forevermore? Are the families going to see any of this money in reality?
Well, I saw your lead in there, and I saw Alex Jones say he's not afraid, but we know exactly what he's feeling on the inside. He's terrified. And although he may see this verdict momentarily as just another opportunity to make some money, he is going to face a bankruptcy judge. He is going to face litigation in Texas, and we're going to enforce this verdict no matter how long it takes. One of the things Alex Jones has tried to do throughout this litigation is conceal the extent to which he profited from his lies about Sandy Hook. But his finances are going to come under a whole new round of scrutiny in the bankruptcy court. And really, whatever assets he has, and we think they're substantial, but whatever assets he has, these families are going to chase him to ground and enforce every cent of this verdict against him.
These are compensatory damages, is that right? The families could still sue for punitive damages. Is it possible that this figure could go up?
It's actually very likely. So yes, in Connecticut, the first round of this trial that was presented to a jury was for compensatory damages for defamation and emotional distress. There will be a second round just over the next month where the judge will decide punitive damages under Connecticut's Unfair Trade Practices Act. We brought claims against him that his corrupt business practice hurt these families and he profited from it. And she will decide, after having heard all the evidence in the trial, whether punitive damages are appropriate here on top of the verdict that the jury returned today. And those punitive damages have no cap. And so it is possible that within a month or more, Alex Jones will be facing even more than the nearly $1 billion verdict he faces today.
What I think a lot of people want to hear that this will foreclose him from the ability to ever do what he did to the families of Sandy Hook. But you heard him in that clip we played talking about Uvalde and Parkland. I mean, how much of a deterrent can this be in the long road for Alex Jones specifically? Obviously, bankrupting the man is one method of trying to stop him. But really, how to end his reign of lies and to some degree terror that he's inflicted on the families who've lost the most precious thing you can lose.
We thought one of the most compelling moments in the trial was when we were able to present a screenshot of his website in which he was inviting his audience to fill out a survey in which they would predict whether the next false flag staged event would be a mass shooting. It showed in real time that the man is willing to inflict this type of harassment and fear campaign on the next families to go through the tragedy that our families went through. And we thought that the jury would find that especially galling and something that required deterrence. And what we know is that Alex Jones is motivated by profit. He's not motivated by truth or any of the stuff that he actually says. What he's trying to do is prey on his audience's fears in order to get them to buy products, as you just saw. And so what I think this verdict represents is a whole new incentive structure for Alex Jones and people like him. He's not going to get rich off this any longer because these families are going to make him pay for the harm that he inflicted and hopefully put him in a position where he's not able to do it again. So we think that this is a historic verdict, and we hope it will reset incentives for Alex Jones and people like him.
I wonder, Chris, since you spent so much time seeing this man in the courtroom and there were so many emotional outbursts, I mean, his character was on such full display. Did you get a sense of what lies beneath the cruelty and the bluster? I mean, I think it is hard for a lot of us to imagine being as monstrous and as monstrously cruel as Alex Jones, to look at the victims, the families of victims, of children who are in that courtroom, and to say, I will inflict more pain and more cruelty on your life. I will make sure another kind of evil is visited upon you. I mean, did you get a sense of who this man actually is underneath all of this?
Alex Jones is a broken, fearful little man on the inside, and he is not happy unless other people are as afraid as he is. And that's what really, I think, underlies his cruelty. I mean, we showed that he and his employees were aware very, very early on of the impact that their lives were having on families who were grieving. And they didn't care because they were seeing their audience numbers and their profits go up and up and up. And they were willing to inflict this kind of cruelty and pain no matter, because they were making money off of it. And because I think they saw that it was working within their audience. They were engaging people who were afraid, who were resentful, who were mistrustful. And that's who Alex Jones really is on the inside himself. That said, the man does like his money. And so this type of lawsuit, I think, is going to have a real impact on him. And, you know, it's important to remember that this verdict was returned against him personally and his company. And the verdict was for intentional misconduct, the type of conduct that is not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So he's going to be on the hook for this for a very, very long time. And we're going to make sure that he feels it.
Chris Matei, attorney for the Sandy Hook families in today's historically large settlement against Alex Jones. Thank you so much for your time and for your efforts trying to correct some very serious wrongs, Chris. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
We have more to come tonight, including the Democrat who is hoping to flip a Republican Senate seat in North Carolina, the candidate in that race that suddenly everyone is watching. She joins us next.
Away in 2019, CJ's co-defendant was acquitted. CJ was sentenced to 30 to 60 years in prison.
If there were a new trial and some of these things were addressed, the jury would have a hard time not having a reasonable doubt.
CJ's new attorney, Jason Kadish, applied for conviction relief in county court, arguing that CJ Rice had ineffective counsel. But the same judge who had presided over CJ Rice's trial heard the appeal, and he rejected it. CJ Rice's story, which I tell in the new issue of The Atlantic magazine, is important because of how unusual it is not. A poor kid with no means and an incompetent court-appointed lawyer. The assembly line of a criminal justice system too often not focused on justice. My father continues to support and exchange letters with CJ Rice in prison. CJ's mom holds on to memories and holds out hope that he will one day be free if someone in power seeks to right what she sees as an injustice.
Of course, witness testimony can be notoriously unreliable. More than 2/3 of the people exonerated with the Innocence Project's help, DNA evidence, 2/3 of them involved eyewitnesses who were ultimately proven wrong. And Barry Scheck from the Innocence Project is here with us. Also, Van Jones, who is working to get CJ Rice out of prison. They join me next. Stay with us.
Don't let me down now. We need to raise the resources so we can compete and make sure that he never becomes a U.S. Senator.
27 days. It is critical that you remain in the U.S. Senate. Ron Johnson, thank you. All right, coming up, Project Veritas infiltrated the Katie Hobbs campaign. You're not going to believe what they were captured on film saying. We have the tape. That's next, straight ahead.
comment about this Lincoln project. They should call it the Liz.
5 degrees. High tide will be in the afternoon at around 3:20 p.m. and then that low tide will be at 9:34 in the morning if your travels do take you to the beaches. The extended forecast showed that our next and really our only chance of rain in the near distant future would be on Monday, but it will only be for the coast. Everybody else will be very dry. As we work our way down the Umpqua Basin, again, we have that warm up here on Saturday, 88 degrees, and then by Sunday, a couple things happen. We knock the smoke out of here, but also the temperatures get a lot cooler, down to just 80. Now across the Cascades, we'll have the patchy smoke. We'll say about 4 more days of smoke, and then with a change in the wind direction, it becomes quite obvious that by next week, we'll be looking at less haze. And then here in the valley, we're going to keep things mostly in the 80s over the next few days, and then we cool it off to the 70s Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Sunday will be much more pleasant because you have less smoke, and of course it will be cooler, and I think that the air will feel a little bit more crisp on Sunday.
With those winds, will that be enough to maybe not just the valley, but to get some of that wind out of the Oak Ridge, West Virginia?
Probably not. Not at this point. We need to get the fire more contained, and we just need some good rain.
Yeah, so it's actually the proximity more than anything. Right. Thank you very much, Dylan.
Next on KZI 9 Sports, a Beaver is on the comeback player of the year watch list. Could Chips return to Eugene play a part in Oregon's chances to host College Game Day on campus, perhaps? And the new OSAA polls are out for football with more domination from our local teams.
What makes my slippers different is my exclusive 4-layer design that you won't find in any other slippers. My slippers' patented layers make them ultra comfortable.
And 676 in Corvallis. Temperatures now in those 50s and low 60s along the coast. Now, this is all thanks to this high pressure that's just been bobbing back and forth, breaking apart any low pressure, trying to get into it. We're going to see this push northeast, and as it does, I believe it weakens a little. Now, however, not going to stop it from blocking one more round of low pressure. This low pressure is just not quite going to bring us the relief that we need in forms of cooler temperatures or rainfall. Currently clear throughout the area as far as satellite and radar. And as we go through the evening, we're going to see that marine layer return, maybe some light drizzle along the coast. Coast, you're waking up to fog in the morning. The valley will remain clear. We'll see a stray cloud or two throughout the day tomorrow. The coast, a mix of sun and clouds. That layer returns as we go into Friday morning, and we're waking up again to fog along the coast. And again, clear throughout the valley. We're going to see a lot of sunshine throughout the next several days. Tonight, temperatures fall into the mid-40s to mid-50s throughout the area. And tomorrow, similar to today, and I want to show you how we can break these temperatures. Here is where our forecast highs are. Coos Bay, I think you're in the clear, but Eugene and Roseburg both have the potential to break those records. And as far as we're sitting as the hottest October in history, currently 6 degrees hotter than the last hottest month in history in 1987. Here's a look at your extended forecast. So very close to record-breaking temperatures through Saturday. Then we do see some relief and back into the 70s, but still above average for this time of year. Coos Bay, we don't think we'll see any records there, but we are seeing a small chance of rain for Tuesday and Wednesday, but this is going to be very light if it makes it at all. And Roseburg, sitting in the mid-80s, also the potential to break temperatures for the next several days, and then we cool off going into
surprised that 79 is the record high tomorrow. I thought it would probably be higher. When you said that, I'm going, wow.
Yeah, I decided to look into it, and we're going to be very close the next few days. We're talking records in the upper 70s, low 80s. So that's right where we are in line to be the next couple of days.
If you'd have quizzed me on it, I would have guessed mid-80s for record highs, but I would have been wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the more you know.
Apparently, all right. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Well, the Oregon Cancer Foundation is hosting one of their largest fundraisers of the year as the annual Bras for Cause event is now underway. Businesses, organizations, and individuals, they got very creative and designed some
very unique bras, and now you have to help out because you need them both. All the proceeds will be benefiting local cancer patients, though, throughout Lane County. So the good thing is all that money that they raise is going to be staying here. Simple enough to help between now and October 31st, and we are starting to get through this month. Head to broadsforcause.org and choose your favorite. It's simply $1 a vote. You can vote as many times as you'd like. And again, all that money will be helping local people that have been impacted by cancer. Well, up next on NBC 16 News at 6:30, the president will be making campaign stops on the West Coast over the next few days. But first, he stopped to designate his administration's first national monument.
I'd like to thank our sponsor, Liberty Mutual. They
Now, we did reach out to Katie Hobbs and her campaign for comment. They've yet to respond. So why won't these Democrats debate? Why won't they agree to debates earlier before voting begins? They're all adopting a Joe Biden hide in their basement bunker mentality, and the media is letting them once again get away with it. Here with reaction. Trafalgar Chief Pollster Robert Cahaly, along with Insider Advantage Pollster Matt Towery. I'm going to ask you both a general question. Georgia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Carolina, not the gubernatorial race in Arizona, more Blake Masters, who has a libertarian to compete with, New Hampshire, General Bolduc. As you look at those important Senate races, where do you see them going, Matt Towery?
Well, as you know, I poll for a lot of the Fox affiliates in those states, so I call it as I see it. The Republicans started rising in almost all of these states about 2.5 to 3 weeks ago. And I don't know if it's going to continue. You never know. But for the moment, what we are seeing in general, and I have a new poll in Arizona coming out tomorrow, so I can't tip my hand on that. But in general, what we're seeing are the Republican candidates in all of these states hanging in there, even against incredible attacks like Herschel Walker has taken in Georgia, for example. Herschel Walker, I think Robert Cahaly has his own poll right now showing Herschel's within 3 or 4 points. So this is becoming a very interesting thing. Yeah, even less than that. Let me just say one other thing. These gubernatorial candidates in states like Florida with DeSantis, Georgia with Kemp, they're running even stronger. And it tells me that something's going on. There is a new wave developing. Whether it will hold, you don't know, but it's certainly beginning to develop.
A lot of attention's been paid to Georgia and Herschel Walker, but we're laying out a case against Raphael Warnock that the people of Georgia have not really heard. Robert Cahaly, when they find out that he used his car as a weapon, and his wife alleges that he tried to run her over and ran over her foot, and that he didn't pay child support, and that he was arrested for covering up a scandal involving child abuse at a camp he ran, and in fact that they found some child abuse. Do you think Raphael Warnock's in trouble?
Well, I definitely think he is. I mean, what you're seeing now is all this onslaught of attack against Herschel, and it was a lot. It went on for 2 solid weeks, and now with Matt's Tower poll out at 3 points down, and ours at 2, and also Emerson at 2. I mean, it's like this entire storm and all this spending has come and moved right out Herschel, and it is not, that there's no huge fall. I mean, two points is virtually nothing in this race, and it's moved that way back and forth. And the Walker campaign hasn't really spent any time attacking. I mean, they've been focused on the issues, and everybody around Warnock has been attacking Herschel. So I think a little fair game is due, and certainly it with those negatives starting to kind of stack up, and with his running mate being Joe Biden, I think it's going to be tough.
Less than a minute. Predictions. House and Senate. At the end of the day, where do Republicans land after this election, Matt Towery?
Well, the House, the Republicans take. That's pretty obvious just from redistricting, but with the wave you have developing. In the Senate, I think it's going to boil down to one thing. It's going to boil down to Herschel Walker and Warnock being in a runoff in December in Georgia.
Wow. So you're saying 51-49. Okay. Robert.
Maybe. Yeah.
I think if the trend continues as it is now, and it certainly has changed, look to the Republicans have the House by 25 seats or more, and get the Senate by 1 or 2 seats.
1 or 2. So you're picking 51 or 52, 51-49, 52-48. All right. Thank you both. We'll take a break. We'll come back. More Hannity right after this.
News at 6:30, we're seeing more companies introducing plant-based products that mimic meat, the latest that's aiming to be like high-end steak.
Because it's important to remember that the battle for our kids' minds isn't won in the courts or the classroom.
The virus that causes shingles is likely already inside of you.
And greetings to you, thrill seekers, conversationalists, and music lovers all across the bountiful and optimistic Truman Plain. It's the Rush Limbaugh program here on the Excellence in Broadcasting Network. Well, let me just tell you, folks, it's never going to be time to panic because we're never going to give up. We're not going to give up on America.
Nice to unwind after a long week of telling people how Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance so you only pay for what you need.
Sure.
I'm on fire tonight. Yeah, you're a natural. We're not counting that. Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
In 3 seconds, this couple will share a perfect moment.
Oh, wow. But we gotta sell our houses.
Well, almost perfect. Don't worry, just sell directly to Open Door. Close in a matter of days. Get your free offer at opendoor.com.
This is a keepsake frame. This is actually a photo from my wedding. I'm Adam Weiss, founder and CEO of Keepsake. If you're anything like me, you've probably got 7,000 photos on your phone. And sometimes the moments that really matter most end up getting lost. That's why I made Keepsake, the mobile app that makes it easy to have your photos printed, framed, and shipped to your doorstep. So if you've got a special photo on your phone,
I know what it was. There has to be something logical for it, but I don't know. So. For a long time, I tried to forget it. Eventually, curiosity got the best of me. I looked into different accounts. You know, I started looking and reading about Skinwalker and Preacher. So I was like, that seems pretty similar. Those seem to be the closest thing I can come to describe this. Most all of Appalachia's been explored, but there's deep mines and cave systems. So to me, it's a possibility of a cave-dwelling creature, skinwalker, that can move from cave to the many abandoned mines. Seeing this thing is probably the single most terrifying moment I've had. I mean, I've seen some weird things in the woods, you know, but this is nothing like that. It was nothing but pure shock and terror, and I know there's still something hanging around up there.
Yeah. Now it's time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Alex. And I'm so glad you had Senate candidate Cheri Beasley on, because it is so important that control of the Senate is so important. And we're going to have Senator Maggie Hassan on. She's running against a very strange Republican opponent in New Hampshire. Katie Hobbs will join us, the candidate for governor in Arizona, where it's possible, if she doesn't win
Arizona might never again have a fair election. The Republican candidate for governor, for Secretary of State, for Attorney General, all say Donald Trump won the last presidential election.
Yeah, I think it's important to underscore that these, in many cases, women are the last frontier between, the country and a precipice of election denialism. I mean, these are not just Republican candidates. Don Bolduc, Carrie Lake, these people are really a new strain of conservative, and it gives conservatism a bad name, but this is really, they're the gatekeepers between democracy and chaos in a lot of respects. And so paying attention to these candidates and listening to what the Democrats have to say about the races is critical in this hour with just 27 days to go until the
Yeah, 27, that's it. I mean, we really have to have as many candidates on as we possibly can, and that's what we're doing tonight.
Can't wait to see it. Thanks,
Alex. Thank you. Well, I want to begin tonight with a pledge to you, the audience of this program. This is a serious pledge that I will fully present and analyze any evidence that emerges to indicate that Donald J. Trump might not be guilty of obstruction of justice and violating the Espionage Act. But so far, no such evidence has emerged in any way. Donald Trump's lawyers have offered no hint of a defense to the potential criminal charges of obstruction of justice and violating the Espionage Act. And tonight, in the breaking news of the night, the evidence has taken a turn that could be what a criminal jury finds to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump committed those crimes. There is an informer inside Donald Trump's home in Florida. That is the breaking news. Reported tonight in the Washington Post under the headline, Trump worker told FBI about moving Mar-a-Lago boxes on ex-president's orders. In each one of the Justice Department's legal filings in the appropriately titled case of Donald J. Trump versus the United States of America, the Justice Department has repeatedly used a phrase that appeared in last night's filing in the case to the Supreme Court by the Solicitor General. The FBI uncovered evidence. There are two key points in the story where the Justice Department leans very heavily on some variation of that phrase. Every single time the Justice Department lays out the chronology of their investigation in a legal filing in court, they always say that after Donald Trump returned 15 boxes of documents to the government 1 year after he left the presidency, the FBI somehow knew that there were still more government documents in Donald Trump's possession. In last night's filing, the Solicitor General put it this way: the FBI developed evidence that additional boxes remaining at Trump's residence at the Mar-a-Lago Club in Palm Beach, Florida, were also likely to contain classified information. That is such a loaded sentence. The FBI developed evidence that Donald Trump had more boxes of classified documents. How did they do that? How did the FBI develop that evidence? How did the FBI find that out? And then, in every chronology prosecutors have presented, they always describe FBI agents and a federal prosecutor going to Florida on June 3rd to personally take custody of the remaining documents in Donald Trump's possession. And when they take those documents, that's the day when Trump lawyer Christina Bobb was reportedly talked into signing a certification that was completely false, a certification saying that the documents being handed over on June 3rd were the very last government documents in Donald Trump's possession. Donald Trump had been hit with a subpoena for those documents by the government, so he had to turn over all of the remaining documents on that day because defying the subpoena would be a crime in and of itself. So the FBI agents and the prosecutor at Donald Trump's home on June 3rd took that small collection of documents that they were handed that day And they took that written statement made under oath that there was absolutely nothing left in Donald Trump's home. And then the next line in the government's telling of the story is always a version of what the Solicitor General wrote in last night's filing to the Supreme Court. Quote, the FBI uncovered evidence that the response to the grand jury subpoena was incomplete, that additional classified documents likely remained at Mar-a-Lago, and that efforts had likely been undertaken to obstruct the investigation. Every version of that sentence that prosecutors have written in their court filings has always been the most loaded sentence in their filings. The FBI uncovered evidence. The FBI uncovered evidence that Donald Trump didn't hand over all of the documents subject to the subpoena on June 3rd. Donald Trump withheld government documents again. How did the FBI uncover that evidence? And how does that evidence show that it wasn't just a mistake that Donald Trump didn't hand over all of the documents, but it was actually, quote, undertaken to obstruct the investigation? How did the FBI find that out? Now we know. Tonight we know. Now we know that there is a witness on the verge of becoming the most famous witness in the world and the most important witness ever to testify against a former president of the United States, a witness who might be able to deliver proof beyond a reasonable doubt to a criminal jury of crimes committed by Donald Trump. The Washington Post is reporting tonight a Trump employee has told federal agents about moving boxes of documents at Mar-a-Lago at the specific direction of the former president, according to people familiar with the investigation. It gets worse. When did Donald Trump tell the Trump employee to move the boxes? The Washington Post is reporting that Donald Trump told the Trump employee to move the boxes after Donald Trump received a subpoena from the federal government for those boxes. The fact that Donald Trump ordered the movement of those boxes after he received the subpoena could be proof beyond a reasonable doubt of Donald Trump's intention to commit obstruction of justice. It gets worse. The Washington Post is reporting that there are multiple witness accounts about Donald Trump ordering the boxes moved after receiving the subpoena in May. The people familiar with the investigation said agents have gathered witness accounts indicating that after Trump advisors received a subpoena in May for any classified documents that remained at Mar-a-Lago, Trump told people to move boxes to his residence at the property. And it gets worse. It's all on video. That description of events was corroborated by the security camera footage, which showed people moving the boxes. After the FBI and a federal prosecutor visited the Trump residence on June 3rd, armed with a subpoena, and obtained those documents, they went back to Washington and then sent another subpoena to Donald Trump demanding the security camera video recordings from his residence. Those video recordings are now clearly the evidentiary equivalent of the audio recordings made in the Oval Office by President Richard Nixon while President Nixon was ordering crimes to be committed by his staff. Those audio recordings of Nixon, when obtained under subpoena, forced the Republican president to resign the presidency before he would have been impeached in the House of Representatives and removed from office by the United States Senate. They were the proverbial smoking gun in the evidence against Republican President Richard Nixon. At the time, President Nixon could have legally destroyed those audio tapes before they were subject to a subpoena, and probably then survived that investigation. Similarly, Donald Trump could have destroyed the security video recordings at his Florida residence before they were subject to a subpoena. Everything Donald Trump did with those government documents, including classified documents, that he brought to Florida was profoundly, deeply, and relentlessly stupid. And the evidence increasingly indicates that it was probably criminal. Everything Donald Trump has said publicly about the case has been deeply stupid, and some of it has been self-incriminating, including at a rally last weekend when Donald Trump admitted that he was knowingly in possession of the documents and then said that he kept the material, quote, because it's mine. That, of course, is evidence of the criminal intent to keep those documents for the rest of his life. In tonight's reporting in the Washington Post, an unnamed person who worked for Donald Trump quotes what Donald Trump said while the documents were under subpoena. They're my documents, Trump said, according to an aide who spoke to him. The FBI, no doubt, knows who that aide is, and we can expect that aide to someday be an under oath witness adding to what could be proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump is guilty of obstruction of justice and violating the Espionage Act. Leading off our discussion tonight is Daniel Goldman, former House Majority Counsel for the first impeachment trial of Donald Trump. He's also a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, and he is now a candidate for Congress in New York's 10th Congressional District. Also with us, Paul Butler is a professor of law at Georgetown University and a former federal prosecutor, and Glenn Kirshner, former federal prosecutor. They are both MSNBC legal analysts. And so it is to this team of former federal prosecutors that we put the evidence tonight. And Daniel Goldman, as I've said, I will rush to the microphone here on this program and deliver and analyze at length any evidence that emerges, that is helpful in some way to Donald Trump's criminal defense. So far, none of it has emerged that I'm aware of. What do you see in tonight's reporting by the Washington Post?
Well, it's confirmation of what we suspected about the basis for the search warrant that the Department of Justice got. Clearly, they received a certification that they had obtained all of the documents pursuant to a subpoena from Mar-a-Lago, but they subsequently had a witness come and testify. And interestingly, that witness initially lied, and then, after being reapproached by the FBI, came clean to indicate that Donald Trump intentionally tried to move documents in order to conceal them from the Department of Justice and failed to comply with the subpoena. And that is why we have the basis not only of being in possession of information relevant to the national defense, but also the potential crime of obstruction of justice, because he is knowingly and intentionally trying to subvert a grand jury subpoena. So we have a little bit more color now on what led the Department of Justice to get that search warrant that ultimately yielded what the Washington Post reports to be 103 classified documents. This is getting worse and worse for Donald Trump, as you pointed out, Lawrence. All of the information that is coming out is harmful to him and is helpful to the Department of Justice's case. And as you also pointed out, the more he talks, the worse he makes the situation for himself.
I want to go over that part of the reporting tonight that you just mentioned, that this witness changed the story after the first telling of the story. Here's the way the Washington Post reports that. And I know in all of your experience as federal prosecutors, I know this is something you've seen before. So I just want to deliver this now. The employee who was working at Mar-a-Lago is cooperating with the Justice Department and has been interviewed multiple times by federal agents, according to the people familiar with the situation, who declined to identify the worker. In the first interview, these people said the witness denied handling sensitive documents or the boxes that might contain such documents. As they gathered evidence, agents decided to re-interview the witness, and the witness's story changed dramatically. These people said in the second interview, the witness described moving boxes at Trump's request. Paul Butler, what do you make of that sequence in the testimony?
So there's likely not just one witness. It's probably people who move these hundreds of thousands of documents around. So this one witness would have some credibility issues. So he or she could be corroborated by other employees and, importantly, forensic evidence like the security camera video. The questions that the Justice Department has for this one witness now, Lawrence, is why did you change your story? And I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to think that that evidence might also point to Donald Trump.
Glenn Kirshner, in your experience as a federal prosecutor, when you're dealing with a witness who's basically on the criminal side of the crime, how uncommon is it for them to tell a story that then changes as they continue their cooperation?
Lawrence, I can't tell you how many times I would receive a new assignment, pick up a new case, and I would start meeting with the witnesses. And you know what they would say right out of the box? I didn't see it. I don't know anything about it. Can I go home now? And then we would have to work through the evidence, the information, get to the bottom of why they were denying seeing something that, frankly, we had other evidence that they had seen, maybe even participated in. It was entirely usual for witnesses to first tell prosecutors or FBI agents, I don't know anything about this crime. That could be because they're complicit and they're worried about getting themselves in trouble. It could certainly, as my friend Paul says, be because Donald Trump was putting pressure on them. Or, look, they've seen Donald Trump turn on other witnesses who crossed him in a very public and even dangerous way. Why would anybody enthusiastically say, I have information about the crimes of Donald Trump?
I want to go to another point in the Washington Post reporting tonight about what life is like now inside Trump world and for Donald Trump. It says within Trump's orbit, there have been months of dueling accusations and theories about who may be cooperating with the federal government. Some of the former president's closest aides have continued to work with Trump, even as they have seen FBI agents show up at their houses to question them and serve subpoenas. Daniel Goldman, in your experience, that kind of atmosphere happens when an investigation is centered on a particular workplace or group of people. What are the kind of dynamic things that develop when everyone in the Trump world is suspecting someone else?
Yeah, it's the prisoner's dilemma, right? It's which one is going to be the first one in to cooperate, and which one is going to resist cooperation because they are afraid of retaliation by Donald Trump. And I will tell you, Lawrence, that it is no laughing matter here that Donald Trump is the target of this investigation. When I led the impeachment investigation, I received threats from Donald Trump supporters. You know, I prosecuted mob bosses, violent Russian organized criminals, and the most threats, the most fear I ever had was doing the impeachment investigation. So it is real, these threats. I mean, you saw what happened with the whistleblower. This is no joke. And what probably happened in this case is that witness was questioned, lied, because he was afraid of Donald Trump. Then the FBI gets the surveillance tapes and they see this individual moving boxes after the subpoena. They then go back to the guy or woman and they say, here's a video of you moving the boxes when you said you didn't. So it's time for you to come clean. That's often how this sort of thing happens, similar to what Glenn said. When you have other evidence, you present it, and there's really no choice for that person to cooperate. And my suspicion is that's what happened here.
Paul Butler, talk about the significance of this movement of the boxes that's ordered by Donald Trump taking place after the subpoena arrives. And he is saying to them, take those boxes out of the storage place where the FBI knows they are and move them to my residence, which I think explains why part of that search took place in the Donald Trump residence section, where they went into his office room and found classified documents in his desk. But the legal significance of Donald Trump saying, all right, let's start moving those boxes after the subpoena arrives.
The former president knew that there was a grand jury subpoena for these documents. If Trump, as the Post report suggests, directed his employees to move these materials to his private quarters to avoid the government back as top secret documents, it's not only obstruction, again, it's a potential violation of the Espionage Act, which criminalizes hiding sensitive materials pertaining to national security. And Lawrence, the Justice Department's policy is not to prosecute if the evidence is just that the documents were not handled properly. There has to be some plus factor like obstruction or willful concealment, which is exactly what the evidence in the Post report suggests. Both Lynn and Daniel know that as a prosecutor, sometimes you're investigating, you got lots of questions, but at a point, the evidence forces your need. And Merrick Garland is getting awfully close to that point with this extremely incriminating new evidence.
And Glenn, quickly before we go, you've got Donald Trump ordering the boxes moved after the subpoena arrives, apparently to more than one person. It's not just going to be one witness who says he told me to do that. We're not going to see just one person on video moving the boxes based on what we're reading tonight. And you also have in the Washington Post report a new line, a new quoted line from Donald Trump directly to a person quoted by the Washington Post, where Donald Trump says that that material belongs to me.
Lawrence, what I see in that Washington Post reporting, taken in aggregate, is so far beyond evidence of probable cause, which is the evidence we need to arrest and indict. It is beyond a preponderance of the evidence. It is beyond clear and convincing evidence. I see proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Really, the only thing left to do when Merrick Garland believes the time is right is to indict this case and present it to 12 jurors, because those are the only people who can decide whether Donald Trump is guilty or not guilty. And absent presenting this evidence to 12 jurors and letting them, as the conscience of the community, make the decision, I think we lose trust and we lose faith and we lose confidence in the institutions of government.
Glenn Kirshner, Paul Butler, Daniel Goldman, thank you all very much for starting off our discussion tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And coming up, the billion-dollar verdict against Donald Trump's friend and supporter, Alex Jones, for his poisonous lies about murdered children. That's next.
We don't have enough silver to cover America's energy requirements, let alone the world's.
That are something other than circuit court judges.
So you want term limits?
Well, that's one thing I'd want. But Earl Warren, for example, I mean, no one's thinking about appointing a governor to the Supreme Court. Arthur Goldberg, who was somebody who was a seasoned labor lawyer, who, I mean, the pillars of the bar are not being considered for appointment to the Supreme Court, and that is a problem on both sides.
Well, you know what? I want to take it to a different side, kind of bring a third wall. I want to hear from social media as well. Everyone can stick around when we have this conversation, but I want to hear from what you have to say. What is your take? What's your opinion of the Supreme Court right now? Use the hashtag CNN Sound Off, and anything else on your mind tonight. I mean, within reason. And if it's from Sally Field, I do love you, and I love that award acceptance speech. I was just using it as a moment here. Everyone will be back in a moment.
By January, I'm going to be, much better, and Dr. Oz is still going to be a fraud.
So congrats to Fetterman's Consultants for coming up with that line, but we have a lot of serious questions here. How can a man who's struggling to process conversations in real time actually meaningfully participate in the U.S. Senate? Even if we assume he can walk to the floor and read a speech, how do you engage in negotiations that are often heated and very complex? Now,
everyone knows that a lot of the Senate business takes place behind closed doors when senators actually make deals. There's a lot of horse trading that goes on to pass legislation. How do you make a deal if you can't understand what the other person is saying, or does everyone have to carry around a closed caption screen to talk to him? I'm not sure what he expects. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania only gets 2 senators. So my question tonight is, shouldn't they both be capable of fully representing the voters, especially in these troubling times? But of course, our press, they're not interested in any of these issues. Instead, they're interested in helping Chuck Schumer remain as the leader in the Senate. So they just circle the wagons. MSNBC columnist Eric Michael Garcia tweets, "How is this different from Tammy Duckworth or Madison Cawthorn needing a wheelchair? How is it different from many elderly senators who need hearing aids?" Well, it's obviously different. We're not talking about a candidate who needs mechanical help to do the job. We're talking about someone who appears unable to do the job. Let's be really clear here. If you can't go behind closed doors with some of the toughest negotiators in Washington and hold your own with no staff to help you, then you can't do the job of representing Pennsylvania in the United States Senate. You're just another rubber stamp for Biden and Schumer. Pennsylvania deserves a lot better. But the press isn't going to give up. CNN's Kirsten Powers added, "The ableism being directed at John Fetterman is a problem. Having auditory issues and or needing a device to understand people is not and should not be a disqualifying factor." Again, this is just complete nonsense. It's embarrassing for Kirsten. The question isn't whether he can or see or hear or even stand. The question is whether he has a medical condition that will prevent him from being an effective senator. If we had a real press that was actually interested in looking out for the best interests of the American people, instead of just interested in circling the wagons for the Democrats, then they'd be asking that question. Instead, they're just essentially another wing of the DNC. Now, the outcry reached such a fevered pitch about all this that the reporter, Ms. Burns, had to go on the Today Show to defend her interview, only to find herself under attack from old Savannah Guthrie.
Other journalists who also dealt with Fetterman came forward and said they had a different experience.
Our team was the first to be in the room with Fetterman for an interview rather than via remote video conference. Our crew did find that small talk before that captioning was difficult because of the auditory processing issues I mentioned.
So here's the bottom line. Savannah Guthrie and the rest of the regime media literally do not care if Fetterman can do the job or not. They just don't care that about that. They care that he's a Democrat and that he's going to do what he's told. That's what they care about. And poor Ms. Burns has been taught a lesson. Do not try to do the thing called practicing journalism around Democrats. So it's up to you, Pennsylvanians. Do you want to give New York a 3rd Senate seat by letting Chuck Schumer have one of your votes? Or would you rather send Dr. Oz, a self-made man who has the capacity to fight eloquently, argue eloquently for your interests? Here now is Fetterman's Republican challenger, Dr. Mehmet Oz. Dr. Oz, look, you heard Fetterman in one of those clips saying he'll be fine by January. I know you're not a neurologist. You haven't treated him, looked at his files. But has there been, in your mind and what you've seen, marked improvement in that intervening period after his stroke to the moment where he was sitting with that NBC reporter?
Well, first off, I do have some experience what he's going through. He has heart failure and irregular heartbeats and his stroke, which he's acknowledged. And I have tremendous compassion for what it's like to cope with those conditions. That stated, this is really about the voters and the transparency they deserve to make a decision for the United States Senate. And for this entire campaign, I've been trying to find out, as has the voters, who he really is. And he seems to either be hiding a radical agenda, and he definitely is radical, but that's a separate issue, or he's hiding his health. Now, he has refused his medical records to be released. He refused probably a dozen times in this interview, which is the first in-person interview that he has done. So when I'm asked, is he improving or not, I don't know, because nobody knows, because we weren't given any kinds of insights into what really happened to him in his initial illness that can truly guide us. And I think it's important to be aware that a lot of what's going on in this race right now is people hiding the truth. And that's the opposite of what we want in a democracy. You want your candidates out there asking and answering questions. You want the voters to be able to quiz us. You want to take questions from reporters and gaggles and groups, unrehearsed, in person ideally. You want to be able to debate each other. He stalled debating me till the very end of this campaign. And what's happening is money is pouring in to protect John Fetterman. And that's why, by the way, if you're upset about this, please go to DrOz.com. We only have 27 days to go. I've got to keep matching him so that we can each tell our versions of what's going on. But the concern I have about John Fetterman is about transparency. And that's something that Democrats, Independents, Republicans, we can all agree on. We should have the ability to judge exactly who we are voting for. What do you stand for? What's going on in case you've got an illness that we should know about? And then we can decide if it's important to us.
Well, Fetterman today made a fairly serious charge against you, Dr. Oz. Watch.
With Dr. Oz as a doctor that is choosing to mock that or to make light of it or to say things that I just don't understand how a doctor, would want somebody that was sick to remain to be sick and celebrating, missing words and having that made fun of.
Dr. Oz, he's clearly playing the victim and essentially saying, you're being mean.
It's preposterous. I've been saying what I just said to you, that I do have compassion for the challenges he's facing. You have to applaud John Fetterman for fighting through all this. The reason that they're panicking in the Fetterman camp is that we're closing the polls because we're talking about kitchen table issues. I talk about safe streets and secure borders and making sure you don't have fentanyl pouring across those borders and lowering taxes. He hasn't paid his 67 times, by the way. Reducing inflation. John Fetterman's been a no-show. He was a no-show as a mayor where he missed most of the meetings. He only went to 1/3 of the Senate meetings as lieutenant governor. He's not showing up on the campaign trail. And he takes positions that are very difficult to defend when Pennsylvania is suffering from a high crime rate, fentanyl overdoses, and inflation running.
Well, didn't you have, Dr. Oz, I'm sorry to
talk about the issues.
Yeah, I'm sorry to butt in here, but isn't it the case that you had 3 police officers shot in Philly yesterday? And he's buddies with the the state attorney there, right? The DA, who's just been terrible on the crime issue. And as far as we know, Fetterman agrees with all of his positions, very permissive toward crime and criminals.
He's been doubling down on the prosecutor in Philadelphia, and it's led to a murder rate that is the highest in our history. We had our 1,000th carjacking this weekend. John Fetterman opposes cash bail, which, that prioritizes criminals over victims. In fact, he's trying to get dozens of convicted murderers serving life sentences out of jail. So again, if you're upset about it, go to DrOz.com. I've got the answers, but we can fix the problems. But John Fetterman has to be honest and transparent about what's going on and what he stands for.
Dr. Oz, good to see you. Thank you. Now, the president spins a new tall tale as the New York Times calls out his old ones. Raymond Arroyo is here with all the details. Seen and Unseen is next.
The guy will fight you tooth and nail on everything. Let's not forget, in order for the district attorney and the AG to get their documents, what did they end up having to do? They had to bring a lawsuit. And of course, he lost, Trump, so they appealed, and he lost the appeal, and then he tried to take it to the Supreme Court. All that he does is delay, delay, delay. And the country can't afford to allow Donald to continue to delay it, because his goal is to weaponize the Justice Department, as he did before, as he did with me.
But speaking of you, though, and I found that really interesting in the book in particular, because you actually